So I want to start with something that's just been on my mind, I suppose, and that's that we spend an awful lot of time in business trying to fix things. Like there's loads of problems all over the place. We're playing whack-a-mole. There's all these things that we need to achieve and get rid of. And one of those things that we're often trying to fix within teams is behavior. And we spend so much time talking about the behaviors that need to be better, like the bad behaviors. And I can't help but wonder if we're getting it wrong. And sometimes these bad behaviors that we see in people, in individuals in the team, are actually sort of superpowers that could be unlocked and therefore become great behaviors. And that's really where I want to explore this world of neurodivergence. We talk about creating a neuro-inclusive culture, and that means creating the environments that get the best out of people. Stewart Desson, you're the CEO and founder of Lumina Learning, and I'm delighted to have you here today on Rewarding Relationships. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. Delighted to be here.
Excellent. And I guess for those that don't know Lumina Learning and those that don't know about what you do and who you are, perhaps I could just start by asking you, tell me a bit about yourself and the business.
Okay, so I'm the founder. I'm also the author of the Lumina Spark model and the CEO. I came to this kind of through my life experience, having done corporate jobs, been an individual consultant. I've had people try to coach me. I've tried to coach other people. And through all that, using lots of psychometrics, I came to a few insights as to how I thought it could be done better. So Lumina is based on kind of a few good ideas around how to help people develop. That's the gist of it.
Yeah. And I guess, so full disclosure, in that I am a Lumina practitioner.
You are indeed.
So I do use the Lumina Spark portrait tool with a lot of my clients. And I guess you talk about sort of what it does and what it can do for people. I think one of the things that I loved about it when I started using it was the foundational truth of I'm going to call it theory. And I don't like the word theory because that sounds like loose and theoretical and perhaps sometimes not even true and just someone's opinion. And yet rooted in the theories of what we know about people and psychology, and personality traits are part of what makes us who we are. And I think, so the Lumina model does a great job at exploring those traits and qualities. And you use language really, really intentionally at Lumina, don't you? You know, you've chosen those really, really intentionally.
Yeah, kind of the vernacular, the language you've used, as we thought about it for several years, and did it in a kind of very choiceful way.
Yeah.
And your comment on theory is interesting as well, because we draw eclectically on a number of different theories to create one sort of comprehensive linguistic approach to personality.
Yeah. Oh, I like that. Comprehensive linguistic
It just
approach.
came to me. Yeah.
Yes, excellent. I'm all for creating really intellectual phrases that can come out on this show. We'll perhaps one day write a book of all the things that people say. So let me come back to, I guess, where I started, which is this unboxing, unpacking, sort of looking at some of the qualities that we might see as behavioral challenges within a team. And yet in reality, if we're really looking at diversity and the divergence away from what is typical, and I know on other conversations on the show, I've talked about the difference between neurodiversity and neurodivergence. So the difference that, of course, neurodiversity is something that we all have, like the brain is different for everyone. And divergence is that sort of cross over the boundary of what could be regarded as typical, right? So further away from the middle of that, whatever spectrum we're looking at. But I want to talk about some of the qualities, the traits. Can I use a word that I don't like, and I guess you won't like? Labels.
Sure. Yeah.
And I'm saying that I'm rather assumptively. I'm going to assume you don't like labels.
I'm not keen on labels in psychology in the developmental work we do. No, I'm not too keen on typing people either.
No.
I understand its place historically and so on. But no, labels are things that they're really judgments that we put on other people, and they come through our own filter. So as you talk about behaviors and how some of them are seen as kind of deficits and not good, all that means is the person that's looking at the behavior is looking through a deficit lens at the behavior. And we can choose to look at behaviors through other lenses.
And so are we, and as human beings, we can read a lot about having a negativity bias. Like actually human beings, sometimes we enjoy looking at things through a negative lens, a deficit lens.
We do have a negativity bias, and we also have an inherent desire to box, label, and type people. It's just instinctively what we do to kind of simplify the world. Our brain is kind of patterning, and we like to look for patterns and simplify. That's why we have to watch out for that bias. It's generally unhelpful. Most things are generally on a continuum. Very few things are clearly, when it comes to psychology and people, fitting into neat boxes.
Yeah. And it's so, yeah, I assumed correctly then that the idea of labeling or typing was not going to be your
It's
preference.
not appealing to me, and kind of the birth of Lumina Spark partly came through it pushing back on the idea of me,
Mm,
Stewart, being boxed and labeled by other people. I didn't like it when it was done to me,
yeah.
so I kind of thought, well, we shouldn't
Oh,
do it to other people.
well, I'm going to ask you about that in a minute, actually,
Mm,
because you've just pulled a thread there that I need to unravel. I want to, though, I suppose, with permission from both of us, have some labeling conversation now, because
sure.
I don't like them either. I don't find them useful, and yet actually perhaps they're the start of a conversation. So choosing a label that means that we can start to talk about something. And some of the things that we talk about in people, that some people can be distracted, and yet, on another lens or using another lens, we could see that as wonderful creativity, right?
Sure.
Some people might be stubborn, and yet, through another lens, we could see that as them having conviction, right?
Yes.
Some people could be seen as difficult, and yet, through another lens, we could see that as precision. So there's all these different sort of alternative lenses that perhaps sometimes start with the negativity bias and therefore the label that comes with the deficit. Tell me more about that and the work that you guys do in understanding the, I suppose, the contra lens to some of those
Well, the
negative
first thing
words.
I'd say is that the negativity bias is entirely personal as well. We all have a personality. In fact, we don't really have one, we have multiple ones, depending on who
Mhm.
we're with and what we're doing.
Mm,
But we do have consistent patterns that show up in our own personality. And if you like, our negativity bias is based on who we are. We tend to favor
mm,
our own personality, and we tend to have more of a negativity bias. So people are complete polar opposite. So the first thing to do is really just to start noticing that. And the expression I like to use is kind of owning the bias, or kind of take it back. Because yes, somebody may be seen as stubborn by me, but they may believe they've got conviction. But maybe I can start to take back my stubborn judgment on them, the stubborn label, and
mm.
start to view it differently myself. So that's one of the things we want to teach and share on an
Yeah.
ongoing basis. And that will help you value people who are neurodiverse more, because guess what? They've been labeled not just by people with different personalities, but by psychiatrists and people wanting to see it as kind of a disorder.
Yeah.
And inherently, the labels there are not so complimentary. And if you look at the literature on neurodiversity, it is unfortunately full of unpleasant words. You're
Mm,
disorganized, you're rude, you know,
mm,
you're distrustful. Um, it's often framed incredibly negatively.
mm.
And I'm kind of here to say we need to address that balance. It's
Yeah.
unreasonable, it's unfair, and it is a bias. Now, that's not to minimize the pain that people can feel through having different disorders. And it's not to say we shouldn't make adjustments. And it's not to say that people can be, and people obviously can be stubborn and pernickety and so on.
Mm,
We can all do that if we overplay it. So we don't want to
mm.
sugarcoat, but we want to be fair and realistic in how we view people.
Yeah, 100%. And so sometimes that awareness is just, the first superpower that we need to own and have. So
Yes.
understanding self has got to be the first step of that journey to then be able to understand others and separate self from others. I think we do a lot of projection, don't we?
Yes, we do.
Yeah.
And I'm totally with you. And the cumulative version of that is self knowledge. So
Mm,
we want to build our awareness over time. So over time, we have some self knowledge of ourselves. And of course, we want knowledge of other people and kind of the human condition so we can kind of read people more effectively.
mm,
If we can do that, we're in with a chance of taking back some of our biases
yeah.
and then valuing the diversity that's around us. And then we
Yeah.
don't bring such a negativity bias to it. We have a more
Mm,
realistic lens, or even an optimism bias can be helpful
yeah. Yeah.
as well.
So, can I come back to the point that you made earlier of, I suppose, your passion and purpose and interest in all of this stuff, and
Mm,
perhaps at times being incorrectly or unfairly, certainly unproductively labeled yourself.
yes.
Tell me more about that.
Well, I can go back to more than 20 years ago in a corporate setting, applying for a job, doing psychometrics, and kind of getting feedback that um, I'm one of those extroverted, intuitive types that shouldn't be let anywhere near anything operational. So I was kind of labeled as a certain type And that was put in the way of me getting the job I wanted at the time. I wanted to move into an operational area, and I was deemed to be a creative type that wasn't suitable for that. And that was kind of frustrating. And of course, being me, because I probably am stubborn, I kind of didn't accept it. But maybe it took me 6 months longer than it would have done if those labels hadn't been put on me.
Yeah. And so it's interesting. I asked you to share a bit more there, and I imagined probably some assumption that you were going to go back further than the working world there, because a lot of people's experience of being mislabeled or incorrectly or unfairly
Mm,
labeled actually starts in childhood. Um,
yes.
for you, it sounds like your first jarring experience actually happened in the workplace.
I would say the first time I noticed it happening, which requires a level of self awareness, was in the workplace. So for me personally, I'm very psychologically orientated towards the world, and I love humanistic stuff. But in truth, that only occurred to me through experiences in the workplace. If
Mm,
you'd met me in my teenage years and very early 20s, I was much more analytical, um, and more of a pure scientific view on the world and not so psychological. And it was through some of the interesting shocks I got at work that it flipped me into the mode of wanting to turn inward and become more self-aware.
right. That's really interesting. So, early years were much more analytical and evidence based. And
Yes.
then the working world gave you a look into a bigger picture. I'm really trying to not deeply use Lumina language here because I'm going to sound rather preferenced and biased towards you, but I can't help it. So that big picture thinking, of course, is the other end of
It
the
is.
continuum.
It is. I was kind of trained to be more evidence-based and scientific and disciplined. And I,
Mm.
I would say that's a value that I have. But by personality, it was in the workplace in my late 20s that I suddenly realized, actually, that's not my instinctive preference. Actually, I am creative, big picture thinking, and so on.
Mm, mm.
And I think I was kind of conditioned in the workplace to think, stay in line, keep your head down,
Yeah.
do your job. I was kind of siloing myself into a box myself.
And isn't so that's really fascinating because we're programmed to look for the line of least resistance in all walks of
Mm,
life, right? And as people leaders, as people managers in business, the line of least resistance is to manage people who are like us because we might be able to understand them better because they behave
sure.
like us. And if they don't behave like us, the line of least resistance is to get them somehow to behave like us rather than embracing the diversity of thinking and behavior,
Yeah.
which is the superpower we're looking to unlock, right?
100%.
Right.
Yeah, we need to value the diversity, and we must not recruit in our own image.
Hmm.
And if we start trying to want to surround ourselves with mini me's, that's normally a bad sign. But it's remarkably common, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's almost a human instinct to do that.
Yeah.
There's lots of research that says we kind of like people who are like us,
Mm.
and we tend to want to associate with them. But that can become a bias, which can become quite limiting and doesn't get the best out of other people. So it took me. Um, I had to have the good fortune to meet some other people who were really creative and in a corporate setting were allowed to be. Um, and I met Edward de Bono and other people in training things. And suddenly I had permission in the corporate world to unleash my creativity. And that was
Oh.
a kind of a really important moment for me to
Mm.
embrace that bit of my personality that was kind of suppressed in the corporate setting without even realizing it.
Permission's such a powerful word, and we
Mm,
often do get it from others. And equally, there's a personal permission that actually starts from a place of awareness and choice to
yes.
open up the thinking around what might be a superpower that others might see as a deficit in your
Yes.
world. So that's really curious. Can I go full blue energy on you?
Please do.
Well, actually, no, I tell her like I'm not going to go blue energy at all, and I think you know that, Stuart. But I know with your evidence-based thinking, you can go a
Yes.
little blue energy for me. You said the word research a moment ago. I'm really curious what research there is at the moment that keeps coming back in front of you that would perhaps shock businesses, alarm businesses, alert businesses. Like what are the big stats at the moment around employee engagement from a neurodivergent perspective that we all should be aware of? Because some businesses out there love a stat and the stat could act as a catalyst to change. So what are the stats that really, I'm putting you on the spot.
You are,
Apologies.
yeah. I'm thinking as you're speaking
Mm,
here. the research that we've done, we've gone out and surveyed, the best part of 1,000 people at work, some of whom are neurodivergent and some of whom are, quote, normal. Yeah, although Young,
normal, don't like that word.
Well, as Young said, to be normal is the ideal aim of the unsuccessful. So the data that we gathered showed that people who are neurodivergent often feel that they're being projected onto in a negative way, and that therefore they can't be their best at work. And it's back to what you were saying earlier about being kind of judged negatively and not seeing the deficits and not the positive.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to pull upon that a minute. It's unfair to ask for stats on this because, and I genuinely believe that 87%, I think it is, of all statistics are probably made up anyway, and they do matter, and the research is really important. And I think it's more about what the research drags out in conversation. And actually, what you've just described there is that employees that are neurodivergent are saying through the research that they're not being managed to get the best out of them. They're not in the right environments, etc. And actually, arguably, regardless of the number that sits around the stat, that's the headline that matters. And that's the headline that businesses need to wake up and pay attention to, because talent is talent, whether neurodivergent or not. To get the best out of it, you need to create the right environments, right? And so that I'm really curious about. And I know that you guys have done a lot of thinking and a lot of work around how to create the right environments for people to lean into the strengths, the qualities, the superpowers. Perhaps I could ask, tell me a bit more about that, the environmental piece that plays a part in individual performance.
Well, I'd probably go for the fact that in any workplace, there are many, many more neurodivergent people than a manager or a leader of business may think. I think that's been a collective blind spot. So, in the literature, typically 1% to 2% of people may be neurodiverse. You might think, well, that's what you might get in your workforce. But our research has shown that if you broaden it and ask people questions to ascertain, may they be neurodiverse, whether they know it or not, that number is going to comfortably go up to 10%. And if you broaden it to people who self-identify with traits that are often assigned to people who are neurodiverse, you easily, quite quickly get to 20%. So my rule of thumb would be, if you are a manager, you probably have got 1 in 5 of your staff are comfortably, easily either neurodiverse or have very similar traits to people who are neurodiverse. So it's not really a minority. 20% is a pretty significant chunk. We often do bring a negative lens, and particularly if people have put labels on them. I understand that some people who may be autistic, ADHD, maybe don't want to declare that label at work, because by having the label put on you, it might invite some people, however well intended, to put some negative labels onto you.
And you're right. I think that there is this perhaps not wanting to declare because of sometimes a fear that it'll be mishandled or mistreated.
Yes, and that does vary by organization. So your question was, what can a leader of an organization do to make it an inclusive environment? They need to make it okay to be different. They need to make it okay for people to have, what might be called a spiky personality profile that has maybe more spikes and extremes in it than some people. And actually, the spikiness, the extremes can be a real strength. And instead of viewing it that people are overextended, so for example, with ADHD, instead of saying, well, they're flitting around from topic to topic and they're not concentrating and they're being argumentative, you can reframe that as they let things emerge. They're willing to call things out that they see and tell the truth. And our research would suggest people high in ADHD, are twice as likely to have competencies around innovation, creativity as people who aren't. So let's look for the positive and play to the strengths. I guess the thing that leaders can do is not expect everybody to be perfectly rounded and good at everything. Some people are, most of us aren't. And that's why we need teamwork. So we do need the diversity of a team, and we all need to play to our strengths.
Yeah.
The worst thing a leader can do is expect people to be like them. And probably the second worst thing they can do, which many leaders do, is to play to the typical stereotype of a C-suite leader who's determined and bold, persuasive, wants a bit of order, is quite driving, and so on. And if they overplay those particular qualities, they become critical, they seek conflict, and they can be a bit impulsive.
Yeah.
Those are the qualities that in our research cause engagement to nosedive. And if you behave in that way with people who are neurodivergent, then their performance will nosedive as well.
Yeah. So you say overplayed there a few times, and you've also
Yes.
said overextended. And I just wonder if we could dive into that a bit, because
Sure.
so knowing the way that the portrait tool works with Lumina, I'm familiar with that language. Some of our listeners might call it different things, and equally might not be familiar with the language or the meaning at all. But what you're describing there is, what would be regarded as a quality if used too much, or if experienced under stress or pressure, or potentially different lens here, how others might perceive you.
Yes, it's how others might perceive you. And of course, you might be just applying a great strength, but in the wrong context. I've got lots of ideas, but sometimes if I throw my ideas in 5 minutes before a deadline, even if
Yeah.
they're brilliant ideas, it's not the right time.
Yeah.
That can be important as well. I can do better on that by becoming more self-aware of the appropriateness of different bits of my personality.
Yeah.
However, the more important thing, as you suggested, was how other people view you. And we are more likely to judge people who are our psychological opposite as overextending when maybe they're not. It's just our perception.
It's when you get people saying, oh, they're a bit much,
Yes.
or they're a bit dull, or they were very quiet. And that seems often, in the way that I've just said it there, or sounds like it's a criticism, some sort of judgment, they're doing something wrong. A bit much might be really excited, really positive and optimistic, and just has
Yeah.
lots to say and lots of ideas. A bit quiet might mean they're just reflecting and actually concocting a brilliant idea that is yet to come out of their mouth, right? I always talk about the difference between my wife and I. So I have an abundance of big picture thinking and that yellow energy. Radical is like my best friend. Like, if something isn't changing, I wonder why it isn't, and I look for ways to change it. And my wife is rooted heavily in reliable caution and structure and evidence. And I say to her sometimes when I'm having my dreamer moments, stop coming at me with your bad juju. Like, because she'll be like, yes, I understand that, David, but how are we going to make that real? And I didn't ask for realism. I'm trying to be idealistic here.
Wow. I at the beginning of my career, I recall working for a boss who maybe have had the same qualities as your wife: reliable, structured, purposeful. And I remember sort of bitching and whining to someone saying, my boss, they're so controlling. Yes, they've got their plans, but they keep telling me what to do and interfering. They're control freaks. And they said, it's terrible, Stuart. What about the next job that you got? I said, yeah, the boss was the same there. They were a control freak. They did this, that, and the other. And what about your current boss? Yeah, they're the same as well. And eventually I realized it's not really the boss. The label of they're a control freak is Stuart's projection onto them, because I'm the kind of opposite. I want my freedom. I'm a free spirit. If I can take back my judgment and say, well, they're not really controlling. They're just doing what sensible bosses do, putting some structure in place. Actually, that could be very helpful for someone like me.
Yeah.
It gives me a structure to work with, so I can unleash my creativity and other qualities even more. So I think with overextension, we need to be aware how much of it is our projection and be willing to take it back.
Yeah. And projection and overextensions, and we're delving into deep level of awareness of psychology world here. And many of our listeners and viewers actually who might sit in a human resource, a people development, a people culture space will understand all of this, and maybe practitioners in psychometric tools themselves. So this won't be new to them. And even if it is new to them, they will understand it. People do tend to understand the human condition and human nature. And yet in the moment, the line of least resistance is to do what we've always done, to treat people the way we've always treated them, to think how we always think, to expect everyone else will fall in line and do the same. And that's, of course, where we end up with a sort of limiting environment. Language that I tend to use a lot, and I know you will as well, is language of blind spots
Uh-huh.
instead of weaknesses.
Yes.
Because I have my preferences and I'm fully aware of what my preferences are. I know which traits are me at my best, which qualities are dialed up by choice because I like them that way. I know which qualities are dialed down by choice because I don't like doing them. And equally, I know that those things are then blind spots. That if you talk about structure, part of the structure that can take the strain in all of this is finding others in the team to fill the blind spots. Because who said we have to do it all alone? Who
Mm.
said we needed a fully rounded portrait that means we can be all things to all people at all times? That would be draining, wouldn't it?
Not only would it be draining, part of the human condition is that some of us are better at one thing than another, and we
Mm,
do have these blind spots. We have kind of evolved as a species to have diversity of personality, diversity of way of being.
mm,
If there really was one perfect personality, evolution would have us all with that one perfect personality. But no, there
yeah,
isn't. We need
yeah.
to work together. We're a social. We're social. We work together. And yes, you're bang on in my opinion. We need to work with people who are quite different to us, and the strength
Mm,
comes through the teamwork,
yeah.
not in us all being the perfect personality ourselves. And we can't get good at everything ourselves. That's unrealistic. It's kind of disheartening if people use psychometrics and get developed and they go for their weaknesses
Yeah.
and they've got something built into them from school that says, oh,
Mm,
I have to improve my weaknesses. No, maybe play to your strengths and work with other people that can cover for
mm.
those, not weaknesses, but blind
Blind
spots.
spots.
Yeah.
And maybe one of the answers to all of this, actually, in terms of human awareness and human growth, is having that language from an earlier age.
Yes.
Like, rather than strengths and weaknesses at that early age during school
Mm.
years, maybe blind spots is a better way of looking at it. And maybe I'm being
And I think
unfair.
things are changing. They were
Mm,
different kind of when I was at school. I've seen it change with my own kids. There is more emotional intelligence in schools now than there
mm,
was in the 60s and
mm.
70s. I think I can say that well in the UK. In UK in Manchester, where I went
Y-
to school, yeah,
Yeah.
yes, that's the case.
And
Yeah.
I'm curious about the idea of a utopian personality that could just be the best of the best. I'm sure that there are plenty of world leaders that would argue they know what that is, and that's them. We don't need to go further than that.
Yeah.
So perhaps I'm going to use some more language that I know you use and talk to with your clients and with those that use the Lumina tool. You talk a lot about hidden treasures
Mm.
and those qualities that are underlying, the qualities that maybe you don't bring with you to work. um what does that look like in people on a day-to-day basis in the business that are neurodivergent? Some of those neurodivergent employees that, I'm going to use language that sits within that space, are masking.
Yeah. So when people are masking, what it means is they have got some hidden treasures in their personality. They're
Mm,
hidden because they leave them at the office door when they come in the morning.
mm,
Why do they do that? Maybe the boss doesn't appreciate their qualities simply because it's different to them. Maybe because how they've been brought up, they've got their own judgments on some of those qualities. So they don't kind of let them come out to play. So masking, there is a positive form of masking. If you're doing it just to a limited extent, you could call it emotional intelligence. I'm just adjusting how I behave and show up in order to have better relationships. But typically with neurodiversity, it kind of goes further. We're self editing to an extreme
yeah.
level to create the impression that we believe we need to create.
Mm,
So we might want to appear more sociable than we
mm,
really are.
mm,
And that's because we feel a pressure in the workplace that we have to be sociable. Well, actually, a really smart leader will create a culture
mm,
where it's okay for some people to be sociable and
mm,
others not to be, and leave them with their own way of
mm,
being. A really good leader helps people not have to mask in the
mm.
workplace.
And some people will call that just authenticity or creating a space of psychological safety or, a vulnerable workplace. There's lots of words that you could package
Yes.
around it. It's almost like when you describe overextension as perception of overuse or genuine overuse of a certain quality, this is almost the overextension of a blind spot to a degree,
Yes.
right? So like maybe something that we don't have enough of, naturally in our underlying portrait, we're putting in because the world says we have to, and the energy that it's draining from us. Like, many of our viewers and listeners will see this in children, sometimes, of course, with their own children, where they might go to school for the day and mask and
Yeah.
come home and be exhausted.
Yeah, the energy taken to mask, which could be hiding something that's really you,
Mm.
or the energy taken to dial something up and pretend you've got something
Yeah.
that you haven't, will take you away from your strengths. And that's the true cost of it. It's tiring, and it makes it hard for you to express who you really are. So yeah, we do want
Mm.
more authentic expression of who we are, but the culture has got to enable that to happen. And that maybe requires a conscious effort on the part of the people that create the culture, which in my book are the leaders of the organization. Their job is to shape the culture, to look where it is and see
Mm.
how it needs to change.
Mm.
The culture shouldn't happen by accident. I mean, it will happen by accident if you don't put effort into it.
Mm.
But a good leader will make sure people can be who they really are at
Yeah.
work.
Well, that's it. So it will happen by accident if you don't put the effort into it. Like, a culture exists whether you want it or not. The
Yes.
type of culture will be the effort that you put in.
Yes.
And that, I think, is a really important takeaway, that it's part choice in terms of the effort that a leader brings to create the culture that they want their people to thrive in. And that's, I guess, when I talk about creating a neuro-inclusive culture, this is about creating an environment in the workplace with employees that are fully engaged, because they get to be the best versions of themselves in a way that doesn't overextend and de-energize, and enables them to unlock their own superpowers and the superpowers of the people around them. I know that, so this conversation is you and I preaching to each other's choir here, right? Like, so I feel like we're very much on the same page with this. Some people won't be on the same page, not necessarily because they don't want to be, but because they still don't truly understand what to do. And I was curious about the difference between, I suppose, qualities and traits, and what we see in personality, to then the behavioral activities or experiences. So what are the behaviors that we see closely linked to neurodivergent traits and qualities?
So I like to see behaviors as sort of the surface level of our personality that you can observe
Mm.
in other people. Of course, they're driven by what's going on underneath. So it's useful to have a distinction between what I would call the stuff underneath. I'd call it your underlying persona,
Mhm.
your more natural personality that you gravitate towards. Your everyday persona is a little bit of that dialing up and dialing down. So we've done research on this, and I'm going to have to generalize somewhat,
Yeah.
because we know no two neurodivergent people are the same, even if they
Mhm.
have the same kind of diagnosis. But if you just go with the general pattern in the data, um, if people are high on ADHD, their behaviors framed positively will be they are typically more creative. They have more ideas that they're willing to share more quickly. They're more willing to push back on things. They're more willing to seize the moment, sort of pivot, change direction, and so on. These qualities, they're not just a little higher, they're significantly higher, and I'm framing them positively. Of course, the literature would say, well, they're impulsive and random and overwhelming other people.
Yeah.
Of course, that can happen, depends on the other people. But actually, overall, there's huge strengths in that. Now, I've measured this um, by getting people who are neurodivergent to fill in personality questionnaires, and looked at how often they express it constructively
Mm.
and how often they kind of overextend with it. And yes, of course, we're all human beings. We can all overextend, but you don't need to be neurodiverse to overextend. Everybody can overextend. So I'm here to tell you that, let's say with ADHD, yes, it's more spontaneous, more creative, more go with the flow, more willing to challenge and tell the truth, speak truth to power, and so on. And if I flip and go for ASD, you will typically find on average higher levels of introversion, meaning observing their mind and maybe choosing words carefully, paying attention to detail, but sometimes within attention to detail, then jumping into the opposite kind of big picture, then back to the detail. That paradox, I'm here to say, is a huge strength. But often in organizations,
Mm.
paradoxes are misunderstood as
Mm.
they're flipping and flopping
Mm.
and confusing me. Well, maybe we need to get used to the fact that people can do opposite things, and let's start viewing that as a strength and we can help them integrate that and bring it to the team. So with ASD, typically higher levels of focus, but we have to have the right environment so that people can focus. We don't want to kind of overwhelm them. So lots of strengths there. I've looked at this in terms of competencies at work, and what I found is people high in ASD tend to be higher in competencies to do with quality control, to do with checking things, to do with accuracy, accounts and so on,
Yeah, yeah.
and have numerous examples of people high in ASD who are either in the wrong job or the wrong culture and encouraged to, be more sociable, come out of yourself, disaster.
Yeah.
When put in the right environment, in the right role, with a sensible culture that allows everyone to play to their strengths, they're absolute rock stars. So I say drop the deficit model, start valuing differences, and then we'll get higher performance from everybody.
I love that terminology on its own,
Yeah.
like drop the deficit model
Mhm.
and start embracing difference.
Yes.
Like if that's just a single mantra to lead through this year and beyond, drop the deficit model. And that negativity bias is fueled a lot of the time by the world that we live in. I mean, we can't switch on a television or look at social media without having negative media forced in our direction. So it's not easy. It's simple to say drop the deficit model and focus on difference, and it won't be easy, and yet it will be commercially valuable.
Very sensible. And it's not easy. I know this. You know this. I'm willing to admit that in the moment, if I'm a little bit stressed and someone starts expressing their personality and it's the opposite of mine, it's entirely human that my mind jumps into judging them and seeing the deficit. So I'm not saying we won't overextend. I'm not saying this isn't human. What I am saying is through being more self-aware, we can catch ourselves doing it, notice it, take back some of the judgments, put a pause in. Have you heard the Viktor Frankl quote? It's my favorite quote.
Between stimulus and response, there is a gap.
Yes.
And in that gap lies your power and your freedom.
And the
I might be
key,
misquoting slightly.
you've got the gist of it. That is a beautiful quote. And the main thing to do is the first step. It's to notice the gap between stimulus and response and not jump in. When we're stressed, we tend to jump in and not notice the gap. If we can notice the gap, we're in with a chance of responding differently and not overextending and not judging other people as overextending, just putting a brief pause in. So that's, there's many things you can do to make that happen. You can be profound and do meditation courses, and there's all sorts of techniques that can help. Or you can just do what my mum said to do is if you get really mad about something, don't respond immediately, count to 10 in your head and then respond. That can be enough to notice the gap between stimulus and response.
Yeah. And, I gave you the quote straight away because it's one of my favorites too.
Okay.
And actually it sits for me as a one-line definition if you wanted to describe what is growth.
Yes.
Closing the gap between stimulus and response with choice and freedom and awareness. And I think that's a really, really powerful ability that many people choose over their working life to lean into and to learn. And I think it's a really, really important part of how we create workplace cultures that really, really empower. And that's a loose word in and of itself. It's the right one to use, I think, to empower the people to be the best versions of themselves.
Yes.
To bring the best traits that they have already, the qualities that they are, given, the hidden treasures that they've got and are choosing not to use or don't feel that they can use. I think it's about leaders and managers and business owners creating the environments where superpowers are the order of the day. And we don't end up in this world of kryptonite, which can be the contra effect if we're in the deficit model.
Yes. So between stimulus and response is only accessible if we choose to be self-aware. And it kind of is a choice. It's actually a practice being self-aware.
Yeah.
And, you can't just say, I've done it once. I did a great course. I've arrived. No, you need to practice being self-aware. And if a leader does that, you're absolutely right. They can help stop their key people parking their key qualities at the door when they come in
Yeah.
because they're trying to just adjust to a stifled culture.
Mm.
We want everybody bringing all their qualities into work and find a way to express them.
Yeah. I was going to ask you today, what's the commercial value of businesses that do this stuff? And it seems like almost like a dumb question, because the way that you've just described it, or like, if I said to any business owner, do you want self-aware people who bring their best selves to work and don't park their qualities at the door? Yes, please.
Mm,
Do you want performance to improve because everyone gets to, utilize the strengths that they've got within their own personality and their own
mm.
preferences? Yes, please. The question, I guess, then in terms of commercial value is, if they do all of that, what do you get? More profit.
Well, yeah, it'll be more profitable, or if it's not profit, it's whatever the outcomes you're looking for. If it's a
Mm,
government body, the leader kind of needs to practice that self-awareness so that they can actually make the team high performing. So in terms of what is the benefits of
mm.
what we've just described, it's actually the prize is high performing teams.
Yeah.
Nothing really happens through the actual individual, but collectively, if we can really have a truly diverse team, and I know who I am and I value your differences, and we can be better connected and make practical use of those differences, then we can co-create, then we can have a high performing team.
Mm,
So I would kind of say the real prize is high performing teams.
mm,
If we don't do all of this, we can still have a team that grinds out results. So I'm
mm,
not saying it doesn't work.
mm,
You don't have to value differences.
mm,
You can recruit in your own image and crack the whip,
mm.
and you can have functional teams that will grind out results, but they won't be high performing, and
Yeah.
you won't have staff that can be truly authentic in themselves. So, of course, I'm not advocating for that. I am saying
And and
we
and
want high performing teams, please.
and the risk, of course, the alternative of just focusing on the outcomes and the results, the risk is that you end up with sort of toxicity in the workplace, which will unravel at some point.
Yeah, if we grind out the results and I demand that you do everything my way,
Mm,
and people need to mask a lot to get on and fit in, then the culture will become toxic.
yeah.
Because guess what? If you force me to express myself in a way that's not really me, it's
Mm,
really not sustainable. And I probably will overextend more and
mm,
express more of myself through an overextended form.
mm,
And if you're demanding things of me, you're probably overextending as well. So you do meet teams that are not high performing who unfortunately are living in their overextended. And back to what you said earlier, I think we can think of leaders around the world who I would say are kind of living in their overextended,
mm.
partly because they're not making an effort to be self-aware. They're just indulging their own preferences and personalities. They're not even trying to notice the difference between stimulus and response. They
Mm,
make they think there's merit in just doubling down on who
mm,
they are. And that does create a kind of toxic environment which doesn't get the best out of other people.
yeah. And getting the best out of other people is got to be the passion and the purpose for great businesses that want people to do great things for
Yeah.
great customers and to create great profit
Mm.
and. So, Stuart, thank you so much for lending your voice on this today. Um, I could talk to you for hours and hours because the human condition is a fascination of mine, as it is yours. I think there's so much more to unpack with people. Um, and really, I guess what I wanted to do today was start bringing that case that needs unpacking to the forefront so that we can start thinking about our people and our people's personalities that will undoubtedly lead to their behaviors, which will undoubtedly lead to the way that they perform, which undoubtedly leads to the results that any business gets. So for me, thank you for bringing the Lumina model into the mix today. For anyone that would like to find out more about you and what your business does, how can they find out? How can they get in touch?
The easiest way is luminalearning.com. It's all on the website. Or
Mhm.
you can find me on LinkedIn. My name is beautifully unique. Stewart Desson, Stew. Nice, unique way of spelling Stewart and Desson, Desson. There's literally only one of them on planet Earth.
Brilliant. There we
Yeah.
go. Well, I share my name with, I think, the head of entertainment at Sony, which is always confusing when I get emails addressed to him. So good to be the only guy on LinkedIn called Stewart Desson. Thank you again for joining us today. The show's all about rewarding relationships. I value the relationships that I've built with the Lumina community. And thank you for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.